I'm bigcal and welcome to my world. We are officially kickstarting off Dragonquestober II with the first big video. So since the end of the month, that main big video is going to be focusing on Dragon Quest II. I wanted to start off the month with another big video as well, reviewing another Dragon Quest game. However, I wanted to do something a little different than the mainline series. And so we have Dragon Quest Monsters. As with just about every popular gaming franchise, spin-offs are inevitable, and Dragon Quest is probably right up there as one of the series with the most spin-offs, certainly in terms of different style and genres. We have dungeon crawlers featuring Torneko from Dragon Quest IV, action-adventure games with a slime monster called Rocket, Dynasty Warrior style games known as Dragon Quest Heroes, rhythm games, tactics games, crafting games, and more. What I want to talk about today though is the Dragon Quest Monsters series, or rather, the original game that started it all. First releasing in 1998, Dragon Quest Monsters is a similar game to Pokemon. You have a team of your own monsters, you battle other monsters with them, you recruit new monsters to your team, you level them up, and you gain new forms for those monsters. However, there are plenty of differences between Dragon Quest Monsters and Pokemon that make it a very viable alternative game in the monster catching genre that, well, wasn't really a thing back then other than Pokemon and Dragon Quest Monsters. The first thing that is different is the story. Pokemon games tend to have the exact same story structure for every single game. 10-year-old sets off on a journey to complete a Pokédex, become the Pokemon champion, and stop some weird evil group from using Pokemon for nefarious reasons. Yeah, Dragon Quest has a different story, and yet it's even more simple. You, the player, also known as Terry, though of course you can name him yourself, and your sister, Milayu, in this English translation, aka Millie, which we'll come back to, are home alone one night when a monster kidnaps Millie, while another monster appears to help just a little too late and decides to bring you back to its world instead, the Kingdom of Great Tree. There you meet the king, who informs you of a monster battling contest known as the Starry Night Tournament. If you win, you can claim a wish, which the king suggests you use to find your sister, instead of actually looking for her. You know, it's almost like the king just wants someone from his kingdom to win this tournament, and doesn't actually care about you or your sister. Yeah, so those are the basics of the Dragon Quest Monsters story. Sister's been kidnapped, you travel to a new world, win a tournament, gain a wish, go home. Oh, and going back to those names, Terry and Millie, some of you may recognise them because yes, they are two characters from Dragon Quest VI, only this is when they were children. So it's nice that it does somehow tie in to one of the mainline Dragon Quest games. And now we get into the real differences between Dragon Quest Monsters and Pokemon. Firstly, the monsters and battling. You are given a slime monster to start off with on your career as a monster tamer. Defeating other monsters will earn you experience points and level you up, while also gaining new abilities. However, you can just do a regular attack, just like you would in a normal JRPG, and something that Pokemon monsters can't normally do. You also have up to 8 different abilities, rather than just the standard 4 that Pokemon would have, These abilities of course can level up as well, so you may start off with a small fireball and it'll turn into some sort of scorching attack which will do major damage on every single enemy on the screen rather than small damage on just one of them. This is very helpful as with those 8 slots it is still very limited and you don't have to have multiple slots for different attacks. They level up and just take the place of the old attack. Very cool, very handy, and something that we often see in the mainline Dragon Quest games. Actual battles are a little different from what you would expect on the surface, as simply pressing the fight option will let your monsters attack how they see fit, depending on what plan you have set. The plans are mostly different ways for auto attacks to be done, from going all out with their strongest attacks, to be more cautious and defending and healing more often, to avoiding magic attacks entirely. Thankfully there is a command plan that lets you fully control the monster, and while I love complete control over battles in JRPGs, I have to admit I find myself only using the control option when I felt the AI wasn't healing as much as I needed to, or was using a less effective attack. Using items in battle will prevent you from changing the plan during that attack or being able to command your monsters, so that is something to be aware of. There are a total of 250 monsters in the game, separated into 10 families, aka types. These families are slime, dragon, material, plant, bird, beast, bug, devil, zombie, and a mysterious question mark one. All of them will have a certain weakness to a type or an element, however, the game just doesn't really tell you. Unless you do some research with a guide or find the one NPC that might happen to mention it in passing, you really aren't going to notice. Unlike Pokemon, where if you were an electric type and you hit an electric attack on a water type, it will tell you that it is super effective. Here, nothing. You will just not notice at all. In Dragon Quest Monsters, you don't catch monsters to add to your team, instead you tame them, and this can be done in one of 2 ways. The first is by simply beating them in battle, and afterwards there is a small chance that they will have gained respect for you and wish to join your team. Honestly, outside of the early part of the game with the much weaker monsters, this is very, very rare. Which leads us to the second way to obtain monsters and taming them. Meat. The most efficient way of obtaining new monsters is to feed them meat. During battles you can use meat as a battle item, giving the enemy monsters some food, causing them to start liking you. There are various types of meat which are more effective than others, sirloin being the best meat available in the game, and bad meat which will actually poison the monsters. There are rules to how it works though. Only the last monster you defeat can potentially join your party, and even then, giving it meat doesn't guarantee it joining you. If you are looking for a specific monster to tame and join your party, it is worthwhile trying to use meat every single round of the battle to increase your chances. Though, like I said, it doesn't always necessarily mean that they will join you, which is the only downside to this particular system. And it can get much more frustrating when you're trying to catch, say, a metal slime who like to run away. Evolutions are one of the, if not the biggest mechanics in Pokemon games. Here in Dragon Quest Monsters, you level your monsters up, and after a while you might expect something similar, with an evolution taking place. Nope. Instead, things are done very differently, in a way that I really enjoy. You want a new monster design, what you have to do is take 2 monsters and get them to breed. You can breed any 2 monsters together with just 2 conditions. They have to be level 10 or higher, and they have to be different genders. All you need to do then is visit the Shrine of Starry Night, pick which 2 monsters to breed, and then they are left alone to bow chicka wow wow. The next day, the 2 monsters have disappeared and you are left with an egg. Now, when you obtain the egg, your first instinct might be to simply hatch it and get the new monster inside. However, given the fact that in order to breed you need both genders, you might find that all of the monsters that you have tamed are predominantly one gender, which obviously isn't very helpful. So before you breed, you might want to visit the Egg Evaluator. What she can do, for a small fee of course, is take a look at the egg and tell you if it will be male or female. Very useful. If it is indeed the gender that you want, you can go ahead and hatch it. However, if it is not the gender that you need in order to breed further down the line, you can pay the Egg Evaluator even more money and she will change the gender of the egg. Catching all of the Pokemon and filling out the Pokédex is probably the main focus of any Pokemon game, more so than even winning the Pokemon Championships. Here in Dragonquestmonsters, while there is something to fill out to obtain all the monsters, it's all about breeding here. That's the focus of the game. Breeding monsters, creating new forms and gaining stronger, more powerful monsters. And so, if like me, you simply aren't interested in obtaining all 250 monsters, though it is something that you can't physically do within the game, bring all of that up later, you will still be doing as much breeding as humanly possible because you need to in order to progress through the game. You see, the early monsters that you get will not be very powerful, obviously. And you think, okay, I'll just take the first few monsters and level them up to a level 100 and they'll be nice and powerful. Wrong. Monsters have level limits, so the earlier weaker monsters may only level up to level 20 and no more. So you will need to breed these monsters in order to gain newer ones that will have more power, better stats and will be able to level up even further. Not only that, but as you continue to breed monsters, you will notice that they will gain plus numbers next to them. The more you breed, the bigger the plus number becomes, the better their stats will be. So you may have a level 30 slime, and then you may have a level 30 slime plus 2. 30 slime plus 2 will have better stats than the regular slime. However, if you then have a level 30 plus 30 slime, that will have considerably better stats than either of the other two. So if you do indeed breed 2 of the same together just to get the same monster again because you like that particular design or whatever, as long as you increase those plus numbers, you will still be gaining strength and it will benefit you throughout the game. And of course, the plus numbers not only help with the stats, but they will level up much quicker, gaining more strength quicker, and learning abilities quicker, which is just much better all around. The mainline Dragon Quest games all have a large world for you to explore, going from town to town on a journey to the final boss's evil lair. Dragon Quest Monsters differs greatly in that department. Instead, you have a sort of hub world, the Kingdom of the Great Tree, which has everything you need. In order to visit other locations, you must go through portals known as Traveller's Gates. Only one is open for you to begin with, but there are a ton more to open as you play through the game. Entering a portal takes you to, well, a different area every time. Sort of. The game features somewhat procedurally generated maps, small areas with multiple screens that you must navigate to find another portal to the next one. Each location within a Traveller's Gate can have anywhere from 4 areas inside to around 30 at the end of the game. These areas are all incredibly simple maps with no buildings or landmarks to them, just themed around general areas like a beach or a volcano or a forest. As you wander around, items and money can be found on the floor, all randomly generated. After playing through the entire game, you will start to notice some maps are laid out the exact same way. However, item locations, and more importantly the portal to the next area, are always different. On the one hand, for a 1998 Game Boy Color game, it is very impressive. All these different, varied, almost randomly generated areas for you to explore is pretty cool at first. But unlike Pokemon, which has, all your built-in towns and your routes and things, those have memorable locations and areas, whereas here, after a while, things will get dull and repetitive. The purpose of these areas is basically to battle other monsters through random encounters in order to gain levels for your 3 party members, and of course to try and tame new monsters to help with breeding. Each Traveller's Gate will have their own set of monsters within them, and the levels of the monsters will increase as each gate opens up to you. Oh, and remember that one of the main story elements of the game is to compete in and win the Starry Night tournament. Well, there are other kingdoms all competing in it as well, and every so often you will run into another monster tamer from these kingdoms that will have travelled through the gates to train. You can battle with them, which is always great because they have much stronger monsters than the ones in the area that you're in, which means more experience at the end. And one really cool thing about this in particular that definitely separates it from the Pokemon games is that you can tame their monsters as well. Yes, imagine being able to throw a Pokeball at one of the Elite Force Pokemon and actually catching it. Yep, here you can indeed throw meat at the other trainer's team and hopefully tame one of their monsters. Which again is great because not only are they more powerful, but there will be a higher level than anything in the area, and are usually a monster that you won't encounter until much later in the game, or not at all without breeding. There are 4 different types of foreign monster tamers, as they are known, all of which will result in something different upon defeating them. The warrior-looking tamers will simply give you a couple of items, while the priests will restore your HP and MP. The wizards will transport you to the final area, which is a godsend in later gates when there are 20 plus areas to get through. Lastly, there is a rare tamer that I can only describe as being green, that will increase either HP, MP or a single stat for each monster in your party. I came across maybe 3 of these in my entire 30-hour playthrough, but when I did it was always fantastic. So yeah, if you can find these, and I do believe there are specific ways to activate them. If you look up guides you will find out how to get them. I wasn't doing any of that, I was just playing through the game as normal, only came across 3 of them. But if you think those were rare, when doing research for the script for this, I found out that there was a 5th foreign monster tamer that you can run into. So rare, I never came across them once. This is a merchant who will fill all of your item slots that are available with various types of monster meats. Seriously, this would have been very handy at some points in the game, but alas, I never once saw one of these. Now, after entering a Traveller's Gate, there are only 3 ways to get out of there and back to the Great Tree. The first is to get to the end, obviously. The second is to, unfortunately, have all of your party members faint. Not very good, as every time you faint in battle, you will lose half of your gold and all of your items. The third is to use a particular item known as a warp wing. The warp wing will immediately return you to the Kingdom of the Great Tree, and you will be restored to full health. I highly recommend you never enter a Traveller's Gate without one of these in your inventory. Trust me, these will come in very handy, especially later in the game when you're trying to get through almost 30 different areas, you're low on health, and you just need to get out of there, restore your health and go back in. So yeah, always carry a warp wing. Luckily though, there are some ways to help you get through all of these different areas within the Traveller's Gate without having to warp out or simply faint all of your monsters. You see, when you go through one of the portals to take you to the next area, sometimes you won't immediately go to the next area. You may end up in a church, and the priest in there will restore your HP and MP. And you can also save in these mini rooms, shall we call them, between portals. Whereas in the actual areas within the Traveller's Gate, you cannot save the game. So again, these areas are very important. So yeah, you will get the one where you can get a priest, it will heal you up, fantastic. You may also enter an item store, which, not quite as good, as you will have to buy items to restore your health and hopefully your MP. And yep, those are just as good as long as you have the gold for them. You can get everything restored, and again, you can save. Perfect. As well as those helpful areas, sometimes you may be taken to another room, which is a Colosseum. And here you will have to battle against 3 trainers. Once defeated, you can either go back on your journey, or continue taking on trainers to gain items. Honestly, I never did more than 2 battles because, well, the items were never that great, and I kind of just wanted to get on with my journey. However, the more you play, the better the items get, so maybe there is something worthwhile there. It was just never for me. When you finally reach the end of a Traveller's Gate, you will encounter a boss fight. And what is fantastic about these is that some of the bosses are from previous Dragon Quest games. So, you get to battle the Green Dragon from the first Dragon Quest game, who has the princess captured. She's right there waiting to be freed, but unfortunately you can't. So you just battle with the Green Dragon. Yeah, it's almost like it's not the real world, so beating the Green Dragon doesn't affect Dragon Quest I, but it is really cool to be able to go there and fight that monster. And what's really cool is that some of these bosses can indeed be tamed. Some are automatic, some will require meats, though there are some that simply cannot be tamed at all, no matter how many meats you throw at them. So again, I would recommend looking up a guide just for that specific list to see what bosses can be tamed and what can't, because there's no point throwing out 5 very expensive, very rare sirloins for a monster that will not join your team no matter what. So, you've gone through a Traveller's Gate or 2. You've beaten the bosses at the end. You've done some breeding, created a couple of decently powerful monsters. But why? What is the purpose of all of this? Of course, it is the Starry Night tournament. And there are multiple kingdoms all competing in this, but you have to compete simply for the right to be the representative of the Kingdom of Great Tree in the Starry Night tournament. In order to do this, you have to advance through arena battles. There are multiple classes, from G all the way up to A and then S, which always confuses me, because if you're going with letters of the alphabet, why is S above A? Yeah, but anyway, the G class is the first one that you will be able to enter, and yes, it is very easy as long as you have 3 decently powerful monsters for that time within the game. So there you will, like the Colosseum battles, have to battle 3 monster tamers who have 3 monsters in their own parties. Beat all 3 of them in a row and you win. These arena battles in the different classes are very different than regular monster battles. You see, you have no direct control over your monsters whatsoever, which means that the control command is gone here. Your monsters will do everything automatically. You can still change their plans to be more cautious or to go all out, etc., but you cannot tell them directly what to do. So obviously you want your monsters to be much stronger, which makes the whole aspect of breeding far more important here. You also cannot use items during these battles, so you will have to rely on your monsters and their abilities to heal up or maybe even revive a monster, as you must go through all 3 monster tamer battles in a row. Once you win, you also unlock Traveller's Gates. So these new Traveller's Gates will have more powerful monsters, newer monsters, giving you more options for breeding, new boss fights, more potential to obtain a monster boss for your party, and then of course you will unlock a new class. After the G class, you will have to pay gold to enter a class, and will have to do so every time you enter if you were to happen to fail. Yeah, but just save the game before you go in. If you fail, restart the game, load it up. You haven't lost any gold. Yeah. So obviously that's what you have to keep doing all the way up to S class. Once you defeat S class, you become the representative for the Starry Night tournament, and you can indeed enter it. Though trust me, you will want to make sure your team is as good as it can possibly be by then. So you've beaten all of the classes, you are the representative for the Kingdom of Great Tree, and you have the ability to enter the Starry Night tournament. Again, like I said, you will want to make sure you have bred the best, most powerful monsters you possibly can, because the Starry Night tournament, while the same structure, 3 battles against 3 tamers with a team of 3 monsters, their monsters are going to be considerably better than anything you will have faced previously. Especially the final round. Oh yes, and the final round is against a very special opponent. Not going to spoil it here because what's the point? Reviewing this game, talking about it, it's not going to benefit from me telling you who you face in the finals. Instead, go play for yourself, go find out. That's the fun of games. You don't want to know everything until you've played it for yourself. So yeah, you do that, you win, you of course get your wish, which you use to wish you and your sister back home. And there you are, you return home, you're in bed, you both wake up, think it was all a dream until you accidentally drop a bit of monster meat. Maybe it was all real after all. Dun dun dun. Yeah, and that's just the way that the game ends, and that's the main bulk of Dragon Quest Monsters. There are of course some other things that I do want to talk about, and that's what I'm going to do for the next segment of this video. Money and items. In mainline games, certainly the early ones I've been covering this year and last year, have had a major issue with these 2 things. Earning money to buy new weapons and armour and other items can be frustratingly time consuming, and even when you can afford everything, the limited item slots will anger you some more. Dragon Quest Monsters goes a great way to fixing these issues by removing the need for most of this. Buying items is something that you won't be doing much of at all. Why? Because you find almost everything you need in the areas inside the Traveller's Gates. What you don't use, you can sell to help earn money. Since you have monsters battling for you, you don't need armours, or weapons, or accessories or anything like that. So all the money that you save goes towards egg evaluations, blessings, which is what they called it when you changed the genders, and hatching the eggs, as well as entering the arena classes. Yes, you do lose half of your gold when your monster team is wiped out, but I would recommend every time you come out of a Traveller's Gate, when you've finished it all up, you've sold off your items, go to the bank, deposit as much as possible, and then it's there, because you will need 10,000 gold to enter the S class for the arena battles in order to compete in the Starry Night tournament. 10,000 gold at first seems like a lot, but trust me, if you sell off items every time you leave a Traveller's Gate and save it all in a bank, you will have more than enough, even with your egg evaluations and your hatching. Anything that will cost you money will not cost you that much, so you should be pretty safe there. Grinding. Early JRPGs, not just Dragon Quest, have a very serious issue with grinding. It takes so long to gain any worthwhile experience to level up your characters. Going back to the Pokemon games again, leveling up sometimes isn't that difficult, but when you do level up, your stats don't increase by that much, and there isn't that much of a difference within a battle. So, dragonquestmonsters again goes great lengths to fix a lot of these issues. You gain a decent amount of experience after every battle. Leveling up is decently quick, even right at the beginning, but the beauty in it is the breeding, because like I said, when you breed more powerful monsters, they level up quicker. Their stats increase more per level, so you will notice a difference in strength and ability in every single battle every time you level up. So it is fantastic. And like I said, you will earn, so you will gain new skills much quicker as well, get the more powerful ones much earlier, and it will make a bigger difference. And like I said in Pokemon, as you continue to level up basically the same party members mostly throughout the game, try and get them to maybe even level 100, that takes a great deal of effort, because even when you get to the end of the game and you fight the most powerful trainers in Pokemon, the experience you gain is bugger all. Here, because you're constantly breeding, you're starting off with level 1 monsters all the time. You gain certain experience and they will continue to just level up nice and quickly. You'll get them up to at least level 20 within no time at all. And level 20 plus something, plus 15 monster is going to be very powerful. And then when you breed it again with another plus monster and you get an increased plus number, you level them up, they become stronger much quicker, so you don't feel like you have to spend hours and hours grinding to get to level 50 or level 60. You just keep breeding, leveling up quicker, gaining those plus numbers, and it makes everything so much better, easier and more fun. Music and visuals. The music is classic Dragon Quest. It is the classic sounds of Dragon Quest, just on a Game Boy or Game Boy Color. And honestly, it sounds fantastic even coming out of the audio system that those provide. The visuals, I'm 50-50 on this. On the one hand, the sprites for the monsters are phenomenal. They really are. They are so good and so detailed for a Game Boy Color game in 1998. Where the visuals are let down though is when you're in the areas within the Traveller's Gates. I've mentioned this, but they are just so dull and forgettable. They're just very basic areas, floors, wander around, there are walls, they have the different themes for what area they're trying to represent. And that's it. You know, you will get sick of them, unfortunately, towards the end, but the gameplay and everything else will make you want to continue on playing the game, even if those areas are rather dull. Monster Farm. So, instead of sending monsters to some strange electronic world whenever you don't have them in your party, you instead send your monsters to a farm. which is great because they can run around and be free, yay, sort of. But they will level up, which is fantastic for when you're catching lower level monsters. You don't want to use them on your team, but you can send them to the farm, they'll level up, get to at least level 10, and then you can breed them. Fantastic. The bad part with the farm is there is only a limited capacity to them. Yes, like I said earlier, 215 monsters in total, but you can't physically catch them all or obtain them all. You can have a record of having obtained them all at some point, but you can't actually have access to them all. Why? Because you only have about 20 slots in your monster farm. I'm not entirely sure on the number, I'm afraid. I've looked it up and there are different sources. Some say 15, which I'm pretty sure is wrong. Some say 19, some say 20. So I'm not entirely sure what it is. But you can have 20 sat in your farm that will level up, and then you can have another 20 or 19 or whatever it is in the farm but asleep. When they're asleep they don't gain levels, but it at least allows you to have more monsters sat there waiting until you start to breed them and free up some space. Tiny medals. These would eventually be known as mini medals, and they've been a staple for the series for many years now. Basically, there are these tiny medals that you can find randomly throughout the game, and when you have a certain number of them, you can go see the Medal Man, who has a striking resemblance to the King of Greattree. But yeah, you collect a certain number of these, give them to the Medal Man, and he will give you in turn a reward. In this game, DragonQuestmonsters, he will give you monster eggs. Great, because obviously then you can hatch them, have a new monster, breed them, blah 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 blah, level up, get good monsters, awesome stuff. The issue with them here though is in main Dragon Quest games they're in set locations, and there are usually like 100 of them, and you can just stumble across them in a pot or in a chest or something like that, and yeah, you can obtain as many as you need, fairly easy by just going through the game and exploring all the drawers and bookshelves and things like that. Here there are I think 8 that have specific locations within the Kingdom of Greattree. The rest are randomly generated within the Traveller's Gates. And that's where the problem lies, because you really do have to get lucky to find these little buggers. Again, I spent 30 hours playing this game. There are only 30 tiny medals that you need to collect in order to gain all of the different eggs from the Medal Man. I was only able to obtain 18 for the first 2 eggs. 18 of them. Yeah. In my opinion, it was just not worth spending hours just going through all of the Traveller's Gates and essentially grinding for random pickups. And the main issue as well with the tiny medals is that the icon for them within the game, when you're looking around on the floor, is the same as gold. So you go over thinking, oh, I found a tiny medal. You pick it up. No, it's just gold. Yay. Yeah, so tiny medals, yes, you can get new monster eggs, and one of them is pretty cool right at the end. You get I believe a metal slime, although they're called metal bees or something like that early in the Dragon Quest games. Not quite called metal slimes yet, but they're very handy for creating obviously other metal slime monsters through breeding, because their defense is insane. But yeah, it's just not worth the effort at all getting those mini medals. I hate them! Post game. Yep, Once the end credits have rolled and you think the game is over, you will see a small cutscene where you are called back to the Kingdom of Greattree. Unfortunately, all that is waiting for you are more Traveller's Gates. Ugh. All themed around specific family of monsters this time. So one gate will have nothing but slime monsters in it, and another might have nothing but dragon monsters in it. Yes, this does allow you to obtain new monsters that you would have never been able to get through the main playthrough. But unless you are absolutely desperate to obtain all 215 monsters, this all seems pointless. There is also a very, very difficult fight to be had in the arena as well, but without putting in even more time, building up a new team, going through these Traveller's Gates, getting new monsters, breeding more powerful monsters that you could never have in the main game. Again, it's all just pointless. So, while it is nice that there's something here to keep players going, I just have no desire to continue doing it. And then lastly, the biggest challenge is to obtain the final monster, Dark Dream. It's known these days as Nocturnus, I believe. And it's essentially a monster, I think it was a boss from Dragon Quest VI. And obtaining this one is stupid, I think would be the correct term for it. Without looking at a guide, I don't believe it's possible for you to obtain this monster. Why? Because looking at the guide for it is basically a spreadsheet of the multiple, like a dozen or so different breeds that you have to do specifically. You breed this monster and this monster to get this monster, breed these two monsters to get this monster, breed it with that monster, then do all these other breeds in the background to get these monsters, to breed with that monster, to breed with this other monster, with that monster, to finally get this one monster. And then what are you going to do with it? Nothing, because the game's over! So, for me personally, the entire post-game, completely skippable. But, if you do want an extra challenge, you do want to obtain all 215 monsters, the option is here. There is more gameplay for you, it's just not personally for me. So, like a lot of the older Dragon Quest games, the first Monsters game did indeed receive a couple of remakes and ports over the years. The first was on the PS1 and the second on the 3DS. Sadly, like a lot of the Dragon Quest Monsters series in particular, they stayed in Japan. However, thanks to the wonders of the internet, there is an English localisation out there for the 3DS version created by fans. So I decided to take a quick look at this one on my modded 3DS, which is surprisingly easy to do by the way, and just give you some general information on the game and what changes have been made. So, Terry's Wonderland 3D on the 3DS is different from the Game Boy Color game. In fact, different barely even covers it. Going from the 2D style on the Game Boy Color to full 3D on the 3DS means that it looks like an entirely different game. The Kingdom of Greattree has been expanded into a large city, so big that we now have the ability to zoom to different areas, as it would take far too long to get from one location to the next. The game itself seems to have been designed on the more modern Monsters Joker game engine, and that itself changes how the game plays in many ways. You now have a team of 4 monsters, with a backup team of 4 in case something happens to your main team, and those backups can gain half the experience through battling by just sitting there. Monsters can now be given weapons and other accessories to increase their stats, making it feel more like a regular Dragon Quest game, which I'm 50-50 on here. I really liked that you didn't have to deal with that stuff in the Game Boy Color game, but at the same time it is nice to make your team stronger before you are ready to breed them. Skills are handled completely differently here too, and it's a way I personally love. When a monster levels up, sometimes you will gain skill points. You then get to choose where they go, picking from specific skill tree options that each monster has. For example, a heal slime will have a skill tree specifically for healing and defense skills, while a dragon might have one for fire attacks. Each skill will require a specific number of points, so if you obtain 10 skill points for levelling up and heal only requires 5, you can put 5 points there and then the other 5 in one of the other skill trees the monsters will have, as they can have up to 4 different ones. This also affects breeding, as when you breed 2 monsters you get to pick up to 4 skill trees from between the 2 of them, and you'll receive half of the used skill points from both monsters to help get the newly hatched monster inside started. This mechanic has been used in all the dragonquestmonsters Joker games, and it is a fantastic addition to this remake. Finally, let's take a look at the Traveller's Gates. They are now all nicely laid out in a single room, just waiting to be unlocked as you progress in the arena like normal. However, inside is completely different. No longer do we have these semi-randomly generated maps, instead we have pre-made 3D environments, with the only randomness being items lying around and exactly where monsters will be roaming. Yep, roaming. No more random encounters either. Instead we have the monsters walking or flying or slithering around, waiting for you to bump into them and begin a battle. Battling is basically the same, only with an extra party member, though obtaining a new monster has changed up a little. Yes, you can still throw meat at it to help entice them, but now you have an option called Scout, which lets you pick the monster you want, and from there a percentage wheel is displayed. If you use the meat, the percentage wheel will increase a specific amount, and then your monsters will all try an attack to increase the percentage amount as much as possible. Get it to 100% and the monster is yours guaranteed. Anything under, and well, it's a percentage game. 50% gives you a 50-50 chance, etc, etc. Personally, I much prefer this method of obtaining monsters, as you at least have a visual indicator to see what your chances are, rather than just throwing meat and hoping for the best, with no idea as to how successful you might be. And that just about covers it for what I want to talk about with the 3DS remake. Until the day comes that I can afford a 3DS capture device, I don't really want to do a full video on it, by just emulating and screen recording the footage, because there are always going to be issues with emulation, and yeah, I want to run it through real hardware at the very least. One day in the future, that might finally be possible. 30 hours is how long I played Dragon Quest Monsters on the Game Boy Color, and I have to say I enjoyed almost every second of it. I had already played through the game previously when I first got it, and I even put in around the same amount of time, 30 hours. But for some reason my memory of it was that it just wasn't that good. I enjoyed bits of it back in the day, but not this much. It seems that my memory had been wrong in lots of instances. I can't explain it. It's like I had different memories of what the game actually was. My brain had created memories making it worse than what it actually is. So it was wonderful to play through it again and realise this is really good. It's not nearly as bad as I thought it was in some areas. The Traveller's Gates, while I have talked about how dull and uninteresting they can be and the things that I didn't like about them, my memory of them considerably worse. Playing it this time, yeah, not nearly as bad. It does grind on you the further you play and the more you have to go through these areas that are just the same, but to begin with, they're fine, perfect for the game, And like I said, impressive that on the Game Boy Color they had these almost randomly generated areas every time you went through the Traveller's Gates. The music, loved. The visuals, loved. Like I said, those sprites for the monsters, tremendous. Battling, really fun, even though it's mostly automated. It just works really well here rather than the traditional full-on command that you would have in a regular JRPG. You can have that for most of the game here, but I never found myself using it that much. And the breeding. How much have I talked about the breeding? It is the mechanic for the game and is the best thing about it. No longer are you just catching like a Pokemon and leveling it up and evolving it, maybe getting 3 different versions of it, and that's kind of it. You kind of go with your same 6 party members in your team with Pokemon until the end of the game. You might swap out 1 or 2 here and there for different type variations. Here with Dragonquestmonsters, you are constantly switching up your team, constantly getting new monsters with cool designs, and unlike the mainline games where you have a lot of colour variations almost of monsters, where they're slightly stronger, here that doesn't exist. The closest thing to that is with the different slime variations, but even then they all look and play so differently, you don't mind. All the 215 monsters are different. You don't have the same 20 monsters with just different colour palette swaps. No, all different. And it's just so wonderful finding these new monsters out through different breeding techniques, because one thing I didn't really mention with the breeding is that whoever you pick first dictates what the resulting breed will be. So if you have a slime monster first and choose to breed it with a bird monster, you're more likely to get, say, I'll go with slime and dragon. You're most likely to get a drag slime originally in the very basics, because you have a slime and you breed it with a dragon and you get a dragon slime. However, if you were to swap that and have the dragon first and the slime second, you will end up with a different monster, and that is just really cool. So there's tons of variation, and you're just going to be using the breeding option all the way through the game, which makes things so much fun, prevents the grinding from grinding on you, and it's an absolute blast. Then you have got, like I said, the soundtrack is Dragon Quest, fun as hell to play. So overall, I love Dragonquestmonsters. Fantastic. If you can, I would recommend playing both versions that I did talk about here. Obviously you want to play the original on the Game Boy Color, but if you have the access, play Dragonquestmonsters on the 3DS as well. Not just that one, but play both, because they are 2 completely different experiences, being that one is remade in full 3D and with a newer Dragon Quest Monsters engine. So they end up being 2 completely different games, 2 different experiences, but with very similar mechanics and things, including the breeding. Well, I'm Big Cal. Thanks for watching. I hope I've inspired people out there to play the original Dragon Quest Monsters game, and I'll see you again next time for Dragonquestober II.